Back in 1983, Panasonic decided to enter the personal computing game with their system called the JR200U. Now, you know I love reviewing obscure systems right here on Vintage Geek, and today we've got the opportunity to do so. So Panasonic already had a line of personal computers in Japan under the name brand National, and they already had a system called the JR100 and then later the JR200. They decided to bring the JR200 to the United States and brand it with the Panasonic branding, and we actually have a couple of these systems in the Vintage Geek Museum. This is one particular demo and user experience that I've really been looking forward to, because I actually found this particular system originally on a whim on eBay. It was just kind of came up in a search result and I didn't know anything about it. Ended up doing a little bit of research, a little bit of internet rabbit holing, if you will, and learned that it was actually a pretty powerful machine for the time, even though it ultimately failed and really didn't sell enough units to be considered a contender in the great scheme of personal computing. But in the end, we have a few of these systems here, and we have managed to collect, in this rare instance, I believe every piece of software that was actually released for the Panasonic JR200. That's because of two things. One is that their library of software was relatively limited. There was only 3 producers that actually put out software titles for the system, one of those being Disney, which is actually interesting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the other one was TMQ Software and Instant Software, and we have the complete library that I've found online, at least from every reference of every piece of software written. We actually have them all in their original boxes, and it's going to be great to be able to play some of these games and really see what the system is all about. In the process of collecting all the JR200 titles, we did end up getting 3 of these JR200 actual machines. 2 of them were just loose and they're in kind of average condition. I have one of those here on the desk today. We also have one that's actually in the original package, which you can see here in the background. That one is still in the actual shrink wrap, and I'm not 100% sure if it is actually factory sealed or if someone had taken it out at some point, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it in the box since we have another one to play with here today. Keep that one for a future video and possible unboxing. But the system itself I want to talk a little bit about first. Now, the actual machine has 32K of memory. That's how it came from the factory. It has several different I/O ports on it. It's got a couple of joystick ports, and I did look this up because it didn't say in the immediate documentation I found. It looks like you can use any compatible Atari type joystick with it, so it's a pretty standard setup with that regard. It has a number of different connections on it for your monitor. The first and foremost being a normal RF connection, which would go to your home television set. I did play with this actually before making this video, and one of the early reviews said that the picture that came out of the RF output through channel 3 or 4 on your TV was actually really, really good, and I tend to agree. Compared to some of the other systems we've looked at, like the color computer that had RF outputs where there's a lot of kind of grain and noise in the picture on this unit is very clear even with the RF output, so they must have had a very good design in the modulator section. We're going to be using the composite video output today, which is part of the DIN connector, which is similar to the ones used in Commodore and on the Atari systems. And apparently there was also pinouts for RGB video out, which I don't have an interface for. I'd love to see what that looks like, but I'm sure it's quite good given the quality of the composite out that I've seen so far. As far as audio capabilities, the system does have a built-in speaker, which you can see in the grill here on the top of the unit. It also has a physical audio output jack and a volume control, so you can run that audio into your television or monitor, which is what we're going to be doing today for the demonstration. Now, the keyboard on this unit is actually pretty interesting to me because this is a chiclet style keyboard, which we've talked a lot about on the channel with other systems. Typically, I don't like chiclet style keyboards. They're hard to use. The feel of them just doesn't feel right. And this is kind of a membrane type of feel keyboard, but one thing I really like about this is that there's a good spacing between all of the keys, and the actual feel of the keys, it's kind of a soft and light touch. You can tell when you've clicked the button. And I've actually found that in my limited use of the system so far, that it's actually pretty decent to use. The other thing that I really love about this keyboard is that each key can do a number of different things. Now, we covered this when we talked about the Commodore PET and PET-ski and using the different symbol functions and everything. But for this one, there's actually, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 different things that each key can do. So it has the normal key function, then it's got a shift character, like the one has the exclamation point. Then it has a special character. This number 1 key has an actual spade on it. That would be using the different key combination. And then you've got the control keys, which are kind of these gray boxes around each key. And each one of those is actually a full word for use in basic programming. That seems like a simple feature, but that is a huge time saver. Even just when messing around with the demonstration, I found that those keys that have the full word really save a lot of time, especially once you find out where they are. Commands like run, load, home, save, all of those commands you can instantly access with a simple key press using the control key. I do like the arrow placement on this as well. We've talked about this. Some of the other systems don't have a very clear arrow system. They kind of are spread out across the keyboard. This one has them nicely grouped together. And everything kind of feels like a modern keyboard. The layout is very similar. Most things are in the same place. The only notable difference for me is that the backspace key is actually called rub out, a take back from terminal technology from what I understand. It's got the break key here for stopping a program. It's a pretty nice design. The physical unit itself has some weight to it, and that's probably because the power supply is actually built into it. This does not have an external brick like the Atari systems, so it makes a really compact unit. Now the Panasonic JR200 was designed to be able to use any cassette machine. One of the actual demonstration shots we'll show you later in the software shows that there was a disk drive, but I can't find any reference to that ever actually existing. It must have been something that they planned for the expansion bus on the back of the machine, but I don't know that one physically ever existed. The only way that you can load programs into this system is using a cassette machine, similar to other systems that we've used here on Vintage Geek. You could use any cassette recorder. It has the standard 3-connector system. You've got the record lead, the remote control lead, and the audio lead for the cassette recorder, which means that you could use any consumer-grade cassette deck with it. However, if you use the actual Panasonic cassette recorder, the one that was made for it, which we actually happen to have, it's the Panasonic program recorder, this one is capable, supposedly, of doing a higher baud rate transfer, which means that when you're loading programs, it takes quite a while to load them off of cassette, but in this particular case, their own cassette recorder was capable of doing things at 2400 baud instead of 600, which is a substantial difference when you're talking about loading larger programs. We did try this during the initial setup of the system. I was unable to get things to load at the high speed, and that may be because of the age of the cassette machine. It certainly worked fine to load things at normal baud rate, so we're probably going to be limited to the slower load times today, but thankfully you as the viewer don't have to worry about waiting for that because we'll just skip over that in post-production. In any case, the Panasonic cassette recorder that came with this system is kind of cool. It's a smaller form factor unit than some of the larger Panasonic decks that I've seen in the past. And one thing that I actually really love about this, especially with our past history with cassettes on the channel, is that it has an on-off switch for the monitor function, which means that when you're playing back a cassette, you can actually hear the tones through the speaker if you have the monitor switch on. It will function as an audio player if you pull the connectors out of it, and you can certainly play audio cassettes, but it is kind of cool that we have the original player here. Now, Panasonic, I don't think, made a specific monitor for this system, but we actually have a Panasonic monitor we're going to be using for the demonstration today as far as looking at the system. This one actually has a VHS built in, and it was built in about 1987. Probably for the pro market, I'm guessing, based on the connectors on the back, but it has a nice picture, and it's Panasonic, so I figured it would be a good one to use for the demonstration today. And it comes up by default to JR Basic 5.0. They're quick to mention in the various reviews about this system that this is not Microsoft Basic, but it is very similar. Most of the command structure is the same. I have not written a program yet for this particular system, but I'm kind of looking forward to doing that at some point. One thing worth noting here is that sometimes when we capture video coming from these vintage systems, the replication of the video signal isn't quite what it is on the monitor, and for some reason the actual blue box that is the standard blue box for the Panasonic shows up in a greenish color on the actual capture. I don't think it's going to make a difference in the grand scheme of things, but thought it was worth mentioning. We're going to go ahead and load our first cassette program here on the Panasonic JR200. As I mentioned earlier, this does have a high-speed mode. I was unable to get that to work, so we're going to load this at normal baud rate, which means that it's going to take about 7 minutes to load the demonstration program, which we have the cassette of here with us today. Now, the actual load command is different depending on if you're loading a basic program or an assembly language program. In the demonstration program case, and this is basically what the instructions are on the actual package, you have to load it in BASIC, do the machine load of the data file that comes afterwards, and then run it. What we're going to do is we're going to do a load, which is Control 4, and then we're going to backspace it, colon, and then we're going to do mload, which I'll type the M, but then I can type the load with the shortcut, and then finally run, which is Control R. And then if I hit enter, it's going to ask me to push play, which I will do now. I do have the monitor on the cassette so we can actually hear the data tones to make sure that it's working. Now it says loading JR200U demo, and you can see the top right hand corner of the little box. You can see a bunch of characters flashing. That's actually data coming through. So every character that you see coming through there means that it's actually loading that data. This is going to take about 7 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to when the cassette is done loading so we can see what this demo looks like. All right, we've got the JR200 demo finally loaded after 7 minutes of cassette time, and ooh, looks like we're starting with a city skyline. That's pretty cool. Oh wow, we got some lasers shooting across the sky. Oh nice. Looks like it's going to put the JR200 right on the screen. All right, I'm impressed so far. Ooh, those flying saucers or stars? I'm not really sure which. All right, they put the logo, which is visible on the actual machine itself, kind of in the center. I like the field of squares showing off the different powers of color of the system. It's kind of highlighting each one as it goes out. There's the branding there. Got the Panasonic in there, JR200. Interesting that it's got the dot after the JR in that screen. Never seen that before. Okay. Now the text is a little bit hard to read on this screen. I actually noticed this when I was testing the demo earlier. But it looks like it's given us kind of a map of the different components. As I mentioned, it shows things like a disk drive, and it shows a printer and the cassette and the screen. It's a little bit hard to read on the screen, but it's giving some specs right there by the computer. It shows you the total RAM available and so forth. It's a pretty cool little visual representation. Oh, now it's showing us how it can handle graphs. Got 3 colored graph lines there on the color graph display. It's looking pretty good. I assume they wanted this to be for both productivity as well as gaming. Now we got the bar chart that it's showing. Okay, color sample. So these are all the different shades of color it can natively produce. It looks pretty good. On the actual monitor view, it's got a little bit of a warble to it, but I think that's the screen itself. Oh, 3D graphs. Oh, that's fancy. I didn't even know you could do 3D graphs until much later on, so overall it looks pretty good. Granted, it's a demonstration, so I'm assuming that they put some fairly advanced things in here, but this would be great if they were trying to sell this in the stores and put this up on a shelf. Oh, well, I like the music on this one. Looks like we've got some horses, kind of a, oh nice, kind of a carousel approach here. We got the horses going up and down. We got a castle in the background. This little guy is swinging on the moon. I feel like the people that were programming for Panasonic were probably pretty stoked about this when this made it on the cassette, because it looks like this probably took some real time and effort, I'm guessing, to make this little demonstration. It's cool though. I like what they've done here. They're showing a lot of different aspects of the system all at once, its graphical capabilities, what it can do with sound. Well, this has gotten me pretty excited about what the actual gameplay might be like on some of these games. We've seen with our other systems that some of these games can be pretty rudimentary, and I expect the same to be the case with this. Obviously, this machine was from 1983 and 32K RAM, so it's not particularly advanced on the grand scheme, but it looks like we could see some really cool things here. So I think we're going to put the demo away for now. This is the last screen, it looks like, and it just goes into a repeating loop. Like I said, this may have been designed for putting this on in a store. If you had the computer on display, they could just let this program sit and run. One of the first games that I actually obtained for the Panasonic JR200 is a game called Crazy Mazie. This is from Datamost, and as I mentioned, there was only a few publishers that actually made games for this system. One was TMQ, there was Datamost, and there was Walt Disney, which was actually using a different developer for their actual development efforts, but they were branded games under that title, and Instant Software. According to the description, ready to drive yourself crazy? Fasten your seatbelts and start your engines. Get prepared for some of the most intricate race mazes ever developed. Your goal is to find the secret hoards of cash, grab them, and then drive for your life, for up to 19 killer cars are tracking you, haunting you, ready to stop you dead. And so this sounds pretty intense so far. I'm really excited to load this one up and see what it's like. All right. Enter playing speed. I should note really quick here that the version for Panasonic was written by Peter Filiberte, and I actually have had an email conversation with Peter, who told me a little bit about some of these games and porting them for the Panasonic. Datamost was a company that actually did work for Apple. They wrote some software for Apple. I think there may actually be a version of Crazy Mazie for the Apple II. Now it looks like it's giving us a demo while we're waiting here. Let's go with a playing speed of 2. Feeling ambitious today. Okay, where am I? Oh, I guess I'm the green person. It's a trap! Oh, turns out that you cannot go down to the end of the screen and come back on the top. Just learned that the hard way. Try this again. Got this. I know I've got it. I can get this. There's only one last prize to get. No! Now see, now I'm looking at this thinking, alright, how do you get that last one? Because it's definitely a full-on trap. Unless, oh wait, is there a way to fire or something? Okay, so there is no weapons you can fire. Walked right into his trap on that one. Oh, interesting. I psyched him out. Ah! I mean, 1700 is not too bad, and I think I could definitely do better than that. Very simple game, but it moves well. I mean, how fast does this move if you put it on 7? Oh wow, okay. Now we're talking. Ah! It moves pretty well at 7, honestly. Oh look, I trapped him. Yes. Oh, whoa, what's happening? Now we got different colors. Things are happening. Oh no! I guess you get more enemies over time, huh? Ah! This game's pretty cool, actually. It seems like it's pretty fun, different playing speeds. Looks like it's got multiple levels. So, way to go on this one, Peter. Well-crafted game, my friend. So far, I'm really impressed with the Panasonic JR200. I'm really glad that we have this collection. And so much so, and we have so many different games that we're going to have to do a second video on this because I want to cover more of the games and see what they're all about, especially the Disney ones. There's some interesting stories behind those that we learned from our friend who worked from Datamost and some of the threads online we're going to talk about next time on Vintage Geek. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, be sure to like and subscribe. It's going to help us a lot as we go forward. And also, if you'd like to check out some of our cool merch and shirts like the one I'm wearing today, be sure to check out our merch store. The link is in the description. I want to thank you for watching today. Be sure to check out our other videos and get ready for next time because we're going to bring in more games for the Panasonic JR200 right here on Vintage Geek.